you have any at that point of time. It will save some time for us. Okay, so start sharing your PPT then. and engaging. And for that, I would request my audience to type your questions in the chat box, which I will take at the end of the 4 presentations. And please mention the paper number or the presenter's name to whom you're addressing the question. And so without further ado, let me begin our session by introducing to you the 2 presenters, our 2 first presenters, who are Ms. Sridipa Dandapat. She is a junior research fellow in the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, Patna. For her doctoral thesis, she is working in the field of contemporary Indian picture books in English, with special emphasis on intersections of gender, caste, and class. She has published recently with New Review of Children's Literature and Librarianship, Taylor and Francis. This paper is co-authored by Dr. Priyanka Tripathi, who is an Associate Professor of English, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, Patna. And their paper is titled as Mapping Dalit Childhood, a Multimodal Analysis of Select Indian Picture Books. So over to our first 2 presenters. We can start the presentation here.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I am Sridipa Dandapat from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Patna, and my co-author for this paper is Dr. Priyanka Tripathi from the same department. And first of all, I would like to thank you for the opportunity that Presidency University has brought with the conference Theorizing Anticasteism. The title of my presentation is Mapping Dalit Childhood, a Multimodal Analysis of Select Indian Picture Books. Being a diverse country, India is home to a complex social system with differences of language, religion, class, caste, and a myriad of heterogeneous cultures. In socio-political, cultural, and academic discussion, caste has captured major importance in India as race in United States, class in the United Kingdom, and faction in Italy. Now, tracing back to the root of caste in India, studies have found that the fourfold Varna system of India, a hierarchical structure of social categorization as conceptualized and popularized by Hindu sacred scriptures, has been segregating the mass into Brahmin, that is the priests, Kshatriya, that is the warriors, Vaishya, that is the businessman, and Shudra, that is the servants. Now, the socio-political spectrum of India regarding caste identities was influenced and mediated during and after the independence of India. With the advent of an independent nation state and nationalist agenda being shattered, voices from marginal classes, specifically Dalit consciousness, begin to emerge by exposing the dark realities of Indian society. Now, the term Dalit, as coined and popularized by Jyotirao Govindrao Phule, offers the literal meaning of crushed underfoot or broken into pieces. That encompasses to include outcasts or untouchables, as cited by Ghosh. Even after being a population of approximately 200 million, it was not until the 1950s that the outcast or the Dalit were officially affiliated as scheduled castes by the Constitution of India and being secured with opportunities, justice, and equity. Within and beyond these constitutional leanings that ensure participation, equality, and equity at all levels, a lopsided hierarchy of social order persists, with metropolitan English-speaking elite Indian controlling the majority of power in this country. Indian literature representing Dalit lives is a long-standing, but the arena of literature specified for children has hardly addressed social justice issues until recently. While tracing back the tropes of realistic social justice concerns revolving around caste, untouchability, and Dalit presence through instances of child labor or the importance of educating the impoverished low caste in Indian children's literature, Michel Superley has noted how the Indian authors has mostly addressed it in a peripheral way. Now, coming to the present study, the picture books that are selected in this paper have challenged the genre of traditional children's literature by interrogating caste, the lopsided hierarchy of caste, and disclosed the ambivalent heterogeneity to voice the alternative documentation of hitherto unaddressed Dalit childhoods. with the historical biography of Dalit legend Ambedkar in Bhimrao Ambedkar, The Boy Who Asked Why, published in 2015, a representation of a low caste girl raising voice for her rights to own land and struggles to save it against rapid industrialization that addresses the theme of triple oppression as found in I Will Save My Land, published in 2017 by Rinchin and Kolvankar, and the sensitive handling of the hard-hitting reality of manual scavenging as found in Salamander and Gunjal's Pooh, published in 2018. This study explores contemporary picture books' take on Dalit childhood and caste realities, specifically the topic of Dalit in past and present India through the select text. Now, why multimodality? Why have I chosen this specific form that to address these picture books is explored. Now, children's literature, specifically the arena of picture books, has adopted multimodality to call for significant critical attention in these days. The very fundamental concept of multimodality is the employment of multiple modes or techniques to convey the meaning or interact with the reader as cited by Grace. Now, since it provides an intimate engagement with children's minds, as well as it helps them to form worldview during their formative years, this idea has gained enormous importance. Debates regarding the status of child reader in relation to the epistemological space established for children's subjective engagement have resulted in a variety of perspectives that are still a source of scholarly interest. As the adult maneuvering is responsible for embedding certain sociocultural values in children's minds through this mode of aiding entertainment that are picture books, a substantial portion of criticism pertaining to children's literature has cast the child in the role of subordinate. Now, when it comes to multimodality, the reader's choice of interpretation represents a subtle transition from adult pedagogues' complete monopoly on the development of the child to the child's independent endeavors in extracting the meaning through own knowledge and experience, as cited by Chaplu. As a result, multimodal approach broadens the horizons of child readers, allowing them to interpret with their individual perception rather than being steered toward a predetermined moral and ethical ideology, as suggested by Grace and Van Leeuwen. As a result, the traditional dynamics of center of discursive conceptualization as the nation, as a result, the traditional dynamics of understanding children's literature posits a paradoxical approach to children that are at once the center of discursive conceptualization as the nation's future inheritors and also completely excluded from the relevant debates that would offer them agency in the formation of discourses of childhood. Now, since I have taken Rudin Sims Bishop's mirror, window, and sliding glass doors as my theoretical framework, I am going to look at the Dalit lives as represented in these particular picture books through this particular theoretical framework. As a news report from BBC has pointed out that between 2007 and 2011, 18 Dalit students have committed suicide in some of India's most prestigious educational institutions. And yet, the representation of Dalit lives in Indian children's literature or mainstream media has been at the margin. The select text stance on casteism or a rigorous evaluation of Dalit subjectivity and sensitivity in relation to the authoritarian upper caste reveals and challenges the fundamental caste stereotypes that are often implicit even in modern India. So this paper primarily draws on Rudin Sims Bishop's concept of mirror, windows, and sliding glass doors as the theoretical framework. In the context of discussing and promulgating multicultural literacy, Bishop asserts that the importance of the child reader's access to books that act as mirror in which they can see the reflection of their own reality, windows that offer views of the world that may be real or imagined, familiar or strange, or the sliding glass doors that enable the reader to walk through in imagination in the simulated reality. Now, coming to the first text, Bhimrao Ambedkar, The Boy Who Asked Why, published in 2014. In 2015, this came into existence with Soumya Rajendran and Satvik Gade's brilliant collaboration, and it introduces the childhood of Dalit legend Ambedkar, and it reflects the reality of social ostracism, exploitation, and caste-based injustice. The classroom space draws a subtle invisible line of caste barrier, as some students seem to giggle, engage in mischievous acts, or enjoy their lesson from higher benches. Now, the representation of little Bhim and his other untouchable classmates who are supposed to sit in a corner on the gunny sacks they brought from home, the division between different castes is made prevalent here. They are not allowed to touch anything in school, nor the teachers were to touch their slates. The casteism was so deep-rooted that the untouchable students had to pass a day without water if the school peon was not there to pour it for them. However, none of this stopped Bhim from going to school, as I quote from Rajendran and Gadi. While in the context of I Will Save My Land, published in 2017 by Kolvankar and Rinjin, Marty, who is the protagonist of this picture book, as well as her Ajji, that is her grandmother, their recounting of a struggling past in order to retain their lands emphasize the relevance of representing Dalit girl as the protagonist and their standpoint against the systematic oppression from the upper caste. On revisiting Ajji's conflicts with upper caste people, Rinjin employs an intersectional approach to emphasize that she is oppressed by the society on three different levels: as an impoverished or lower class person, as a woman, and as a Dalit or lower caste. Ajji, who is Marty's grandmother, was ordered to go back to her husband's house and look after his land, as quoted by Rinsin and Kulvankar. And when she demanded the ancestral land of her parents, there were several casteist remarks, such as, and since when have people from lower castes started to inherit land? However, Ajji struggles win over her rights to maintain her land despite the plotting and planning of the upper caste people, providing insight into the economic and social marginalization of Dalit faith. Now, Salamander and Gunjal's picture book, Pooh, published in 2018, explicitly bring out the tropes of hostility and social ostracization in the space of school, as the anonymous little girl states, I don't have, and here I quote, I don't have many friends, and I don't know why. Or, I quote again, most people ignore me. It's not like I care. When children don't see themselves mirrored in the books that they read, or when the representations they see are twisted, negative, or ridiculous.
Just 5 minutes more for you. Okay.
They learn how they are undervalued in their culture in which they live. Taking cue from Bishop's argument, this paper also emphasizes on the importance of looking forward to literature, that different students from different cultures that make up the unity in diversity of Indian society that can find their mirrors. Now, again, I would like to mention how in now coming to the conclusion, all the three picture books that I have chosen in this paper underpin different approaches to the central theme of Dalit childhood while addressing the heterogeneity of caste experiences. These texts re-evaluate the constructions of Dalit childhood, encompassing different backgrounds, regional differences, diversity of culture, familial setup, schooling, and multiple other factors. The genre of picture books has shifted from portraying middle-class Hindu protagonists, as found in Michel Superlet's book, and it has shifted to visualizing the marginalized childhood of Dalit, and the inclusion of these texts in school syllabus has the potential to facilitate readership and bring social change, as found in Mehra. Now, Srinivas has also noted the necessity to democratize the school spaces as well as the public spaces through representations that make multiple childhoods visible. Different tales a collection of contemporary children's literature that deals with marginalized childhood, attempts to reclaim and focus on the cultural imaginaries that are rooted in the lives of Dalit children, depicting misery and discrimination, as well as a sense of belonging. These stories, unveiling the hidden world of injustice, emphasize the moral obligations that Indian children's literature has in present times. Towards the new constituency of children who get introduced to school as first generation learners, as found in Deepa Srinivas's The Different Tales. Now, addressing the tropes of multiple childhoods regarding caste-based discrimination through innovative modes of visual verbal texts that perform as an agent of social change. The contemporary picture books not only unsettle the adult-child binary to break through the concept of class, caste, and social injustice, but also provides a voice to the marginalized childhood that has previously been neglected from the mainstream media of children's literature in India. Although the shift in perspective may take time, these emerging representations of multifaceted childhood from the periphery are a promising start. And with this, I conclude my paper, and I thank all the organizers and all the presenters, my fellow colleagues, and Ma'am Miss Debanjana Nayek for sharing this session.
Thank you, Ms. Dandapat. It was a very nice paper with a lot of new interpretations, and we have to now move on to the next presenter, who is this is paper 22, and this will be presented by Ms. Kalaiarasi R. She's a PhD research scholar in the Department of English Studies, Central University of Tamil Nadu, India. And the name of the paper is Visualizing the Invisibles, the Problems and Aesthetics of Representation. So over to Kalaiarasi. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much for the warm welcome, ma'am. Let me start my presentation. So the title of my paper is Visualizing the Invisibles, the Problems and Aesthetics of Representation. Visuality is a significant mode of representation, and visual inquiry is important in understanding the society that we live in. I quote the words of Gary Michael Tartakow: visual imagery is both register of social reality and a vital instrument for changing it. It is a means of mediating identities like literature and arts. Indian visual tradition is an extensive repository of Brahminical visual imagery, which had no explicit imageries of Dalits. Like textual narratives, it deals with the representation of Savarnas and their subject of interest. It glorifies a culture of Brahmins, and hence the Indian visual imageries are full of Hindu symbols. The idea of India one gets from the mainstream visual representation is sacred. Varghese quoted the words of Anticasteism that India is a visual and visionary culture, one in which eyes have a prominent role in the apprehension of the sacred. Like literature, mainstream visual narratives are preoccupied only with the life of a small section of Indian societies, whereas Dalits, who constitute 1/6 of the entire population, are largely invisible in the visual discourses. Their secluded life and unique experiences of untouchability and suffering had no space in the mainstream narratives, since the visual images produced were from the dominant caste groups with social privileges. However, Dalits are the pillars of modern Indian nation, the labor force. But where is the representation of those people? Dalits are totally invisible and made insignificant in the whole picture of India. Dalit invisibility is predominant in all spheres of life, and there is a clear sign of restriction, especially in arts, media, and culture. In the Indian social context, caste is a taboo subject not to be talked about, but it is rooted in the lives of people in all walks of life. The social environment created around Dalits considered them as inauspicious creatures. Even the verses of Manu Dharma Shastra tells the same. A person who is touched by an outcast, a person who is touched by a woman who has given birth to a child, or a person who touched a corpse is considered as polluted and will be purified only by bathing. Similarly, a person is impure just by the sight of an impure person. So in order to purify him, the person has to sip water and softly chant the mantras. This social invisibility is a primary cause for Dalit invisibility in all spheres of life. When it comes to lives of Dalits, it is closely connected with dance, music, and other art forms. But on the contrary, they are artistically marginalized. Historically speaking, Dalits were forced to take the odd jobs in the society, like disposing the dead animals and skinning the dead animals as well. Though they are involved in cultural activities like playing the drums, it is often looked down upon and is associated with begging and entertainment for the upper caste viewers. This long-term exclusion is put to end with the contemporary Dalit cultural movements, which helps in reclaiming the lost space in the public cultural sphere. The continuing oppressive practices are destabilized by forming strong artistic communities, and forms like Ambedkar Jalsa, Doha, and Palna, casteless collective, etc. So Neelam production of Power Ranjit took the artistic movement to the next level with the pride of Dalit culture. Gopal Guru calls this phenomena as the re-emergence of Dalit culture, claiming the authenticity of their culture, which was misinterpreted and appropriated by upper caste. The aesthetics of Dalit art is that it seeks a change in the society and equality for all individuals, and strongly resonates with the thoughts of Ambedkar and Phule. Here I quote the words of Rans here. The tradition of ancient India did not have anything for the Dalits that they could proudly own, and thus they had to look at their own culture to develop myths and reject religious texts to create a separate culture, and thus they have created a poetry, folk songs, and musical instruments to satisfy their cultural needs and aspiration. This omnipresence of Brahminical hegemony in all spheres of life sidelined Dalits and made them invisible. Dalits assert a strong presence in the form of counterculture through which they try to assert their identity and challenge the hegemonic suppression. It gives them a space to build a parallel discourse along the mainstream. In this case, the regional anti-caste movements are very crucial in understanding the counterculture of Dalits. Dalit art had its symbolisms, and it believes in the intrinsic value of art. It has a deep social and political message, and it is completely against Hindu notions, beliefs, and sentiments. It adopts the ideas of Ambedkar and Buddhism, and instead of giving undue importance to unseen gods. This shift in the usage of alternative symbol is not just the rejection of religion, but also the social hierarchy with a dream to embrace a new social order. This use of Ambedkar and Buddhist imagery and iconography helps them to build a politically conscious Dalit identity. So now visual representation of Dalits. Visual representation of Dalits and caste are important since it would take the discussion to the wider audience than the textual narratives. Graphical representation is one unique mode of visual representation since it is both visual and textual. Indian graphic novels had their origin with the comic tradition of Amar Chitra Kada, which is concerned with the Indian epics like Puranas, stories of Hanuman, Lord Krishna, tales from Upanishads, and stories of other Indian brave heroes. All these were taken from religious communities and myths. So the main agenda of Anand Pai in creating the Amar Chitra Kada series is to transmit the so-called Indian culture and values to children. But however, what is meant by Indian culture and whose values are being promoted and universalized is a matter of question. In recent times, graphic novels have moved from children to a broader audience because of the subject matter that it talks about. So now the recent scholarships on Amar Chitra Kada series unveils the relationship between the aesthetics of the series and the cultural politics of Hindu nationalism in India. Unlike Amar Chitra Kada, the contemporary Indian graphic narratives opens up the discussion to a broader themes like ecological violence, nationalism, gender-based violence, displacement, aesthetic hybridity, and other social injustice happening in and around India. These graphic novels disturb the so-called Indianness creator so far and portray the complex ideas of Indianness. It rewrites the histories that has been narrated earlier and speaks up for the silenced voice of oppressed communities. It addresses the existing intricacies and complexities in society and invites the reader to see the inauspicious things. The discourses on Dalits and visuality is quite rare, but it was made possible with the efforts of Navayana Publishing House, who came up with two gripping graphic narratives, Bhimayana and A Gardener in the Wasteland. Graphical documentation of casteism and experience of Dalits is the need of the hour and is a critical turn in the Dalit studies. Visualization of Dalit experiences offers an upright understanding of caste in contemporary Indian society. The visual imageries of Dalits come from the daily experiences, the pain and the suffering they undergo. Seeking a change in the society and aspiring for equality, resonating the thoughts of Ambedkar and Pule are the aesthetics of Dalit narrative, and these could be very much evident in the graphic novels as well. Graphic novels, though are popular in elite form, it documents a historical oppression of pain and brings an alternative history to the world in the process of its visualization and narration. The form itself is capable of eliciting an immediate emotional response from the readers through its illustration. It presents the subaltern perspective that challenges the dominant power and objectivity discourses. The novel A Gardener in the Wasteland is roughly connected with the life and struggle of Pule and Savitribai, and it is an adaptation of Pule's work, Slavery, which was published in the year 1873. The novel presents a disturbing image of India and challenges the nation's established and commonly accepted histories. The main aim of adapting a 19th century critical work in the 21st century is to make us aware that how Dalit marginalization continues to exist even now, and it tries to historicize Dalit movements and people involved in it, and to bring their contribution to the limelight, which the mainstream historians fail to do. The story of the novel A Gardener in the Wasteland was written by Srividya Natarajan, and the artwork was done by Aparajita Ninan. This graphical narration of casteism takes the local issue to the global audience, and on the other hand, it also facilitates in revisioning the history by reframing the archive. This illustrated tale calls our attention to alternate histories and challenges the power and structure of the institutions in Indian society. The novel informs the reader the pathetic conditions of Dalits. The panels, the visuality of the novel makes the reader understand the systematic oppression happening in the name of religion and caste. Perhaps the panels in page number 11, 10 and 11 illustrates the unequal distribution of wealth and money, where casteism is often advocated as it is just a system division of labor. It depicts how Brahmins are exploiting the labor of Dalits and looting money from them. One side of the panel shows poor Dalits toiling in the agriculture field, and on the other side we see Brahmin comfortably sitting on a couch and sleeping, but finally enjoying the fruits of others' hard work. So according to Brahmin, they are the superior people, and others are belonging to other varnas are born to serve them. Manusmriti says that a Brahmin may compel men of a servile class to perform servile duty because such a man was created by the Almighty only for the purpose of serving Brahmins, and Brahmins should not be afflicted with hunger, or the whole kingdom will be afflicted with famine. The novel, in the process of visualizing Dalits, it exposes the corrupt minds of Brahmins. The visual aspect of the form educate the readers by picturizing the emotions and psychological situations of the characters. The novel is historical, and there is a constant shift in the past and the present, which makes us to revisit the critical pages of Indian history, like destruction of Babri Masjid, Gujarat Right, and anti-reservation protest, and most importantly, crushing of Buddhist monks in oil presses by Hindus. This novel questions the process of history making while providing an alternative historical perspective that challenges the Brahminical preoccupation of traditional history and myth. Deepak Yadav, he compares this novel with the comic history of Indian classic Amar Chitra Kada, which had its base with Hindu mythology. He says that the novel A Gardener in the Wasteland is a step ahead in retelling Indian history, whose intention is to bring unpleasant truth to the mainstream. This view is quite opposite to Anand Pai's vision, whose intention was to inform only the pleasant things to the people. Unlike that, this novel is a scornful attack on Hinduism, whose tenets are molded in the hands of Brahmins to exert their supremacy and power over Shudras and Ati-Shudras. Pule breaks the tenets of Hinduism and questions the authority of these sacred texts. The novel discloses the cunningness of Brahmins in formulating sacred texts for their selfish interest. It skillfully illustrates various tales from Manusmriti, including the birth of Brahmins from the mouth of Brahma. The panels of the novel marks Brahma for taking the role of woman and questions whether Brahma had 4 vaginas in 4 different places like mouth, arms, groin, and legs. Pule calls Brahma as a daughter seducer. So basically, Pule in this novel, he points at the holes in the story and insists in mythological stories as well. The novel deconstructs the myths created by Manusmriti by questioning the authenticity of Hindu scriptures. The novel, again, it artistically draws out the ignored reality and existing false notions toward the sacred text of Hinduism. Pule here, he subverts the piousness of the text by his scientific intervention, and the panels in the novel has captured it very subtly. And Pule brings out his version of the myth, whereas the panels which shows Pule's and Brahman's version of creation stories may shock the reader, but it shows the reader that how revolutionary Pule was in 1880s, much before Gandhi and Ambedkar came to the scene. Deepak Yadav, he believes that the graphic novel can elicit an immediate response in the reader through its illustration than the textual narratives. He says, rather than presenting objective truth like written text, graphic novel is able to capture the subjective self of a person by picturing the emotions and psychological situations of the characters. So the panels in the novel sensitizes the people about the cruelties of caste system and makes them to understand the filthiness of caste. And it is an open critique of Brahmins upholding their supremacy over Dalits. The main argument of Pule in the novel is Brahmins taking the superiority with the privilege of interpreting their scriptures. Pule and Savitribai are portrayed as gardeners weeding out the poison casteism from the society. And throughout the novel, we could see the metaphor gardening runs throughout. The novel, to an extent, it spotlights the gaps in the representation of Dalit women. It is indeed a challenge to the mainstream historical erasure from the accounts of Indian national state. Though the novel is a brief account on the life of Pule, he is not portrayed as the only hero of the novel. Instead, it talks about the role of Savitribai in shaping the thoughts of Pule. The struggles, the humiliation that she faced in her life makes her the hero of the novel. The novel's depiction of Savitribai is quite opposite to the comic tradition where women had no scope to be the novel's hero. They are either portrayed as a victim or goddess or always caught in a Sati or Shakti binary. Even if they are the lead characters, they'll be presented as a triumvirate of culture, tradition, and nation. The novel depicts Savitribai as a pioneer woman to fight against Brahmanism. This novel, it cleverly brings out the interculturality in the panels as well by bringing Afro-American women campaigns for their education rights. The novel makes the reader revisit the portrayal of other bodies in history, which is the significant aspect of visualization. The visual depiction in the novel underlines the way caste system, Brahmins systematically oppresses the lower caste in the name of religion and God. The novel challenges the mainstream visual depiction of characters where the good guys are fair skinned and the bad ones are darker skin tone. The novel portrays Brahmins as Rakshasas with guns since they invaded India by killing innocent indigenous people. The mainstream visual narratives often have the tendency of othering. It carries with it the biasness of caste, class, and gender. Caste-based colorism is very much evident and it subtly reinforces the notion that categorizes characters as rich, poor, weak, or powerful, or ugly, or beautiful. The novel openly counters the mainstream visual representation of Dalits.
Kalaiarasi, you have 5 minutes more.
Yes, ma'am. The novel openly counters a mainstream visual representation of Dalits. Brahmins in the novel are portrayed as muscular, hirsute, fat, and pot-bellied, whereas Dalits are emancipated and stooped. This novel demystifies the Dasavatar of Lord Vishnu and brings an alternative history on Aryan invasion and civilization's own origin history. I would like to quote the words of Pramod K. Noyer here. Indian history might be read through and in the grotesque bodies of Brahmins, Rakshasas, Aryans, and mythological figures like Parashuram. The frontal and the side view of Aryans in the panel reveals the violent histories behind their divinity. Then it further critically analyzes the various avatars of Vishnu. Jyotipa is suspicious of those avatars. He feels that different avatars are the attempt of Aryan invaders through sea and waterways. This suspicion and Pule's conclusion may not be accurate, but it is a starting point to question the authenticity of myths. Ambedkar had said in his treatise Annihilation of Caste that any religion that failed to prove its scientific authenticity is not worth following. Thus, the novel is a significant attempt in fostering anti-caste thoughts in the minds of readers. That's it. Thank you so much, ma'am, for giving me this opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Kalaiarasi. That was a wonderful paper, and I hope our audience have also enjoyed a lot, and hopefully they are also ready with their questions. And then we move on to our next presenter, and our next presenter is Mr. Sahin Reja Mondal, and Mr. Mondal is at present working at Domkol Girls College in the Department of English as state-aided college teacher, Category 1. He has been teaching here for 4 years and he has participated in various literary workshops, webinars, and seminars. His interest areas are as follows: literary criticism and theory, post colonial literature, African American literature, Indian writing in English, Dalit studies, cultural studies, partition literature, diasporic literature, popular literature, and world literature in English. And today, Mr. Mondal will present on Towards the Signifying Buffalo, a deconstructive study of casteism through the Dalit lens in Bhimayana experiences of untouchability. So over to Mr. Mondal now. We can start presenting, yes. Mr. Mondal, I think you are on mute.
Yes. Am I audible, ma'am?
Yes, you're audible now.
Okay. It is my honor to have an opportunity to present my paper, especially thanks to Presidency University, and especially thanks to ma'am who is sharing this session. So let me introduce the introduction of this paper. And this introduction are divided into three things: that the basic role of Indian literature, and how Dalit literature came into existence, and next on what the paper examines in the novel. So let me start with the very things. Indian literature has gloriously been representing the recognizable and very colorful culture, civilization, heritage, and tradition of India in various literary forms, such as epics, legends, songs, ballads, lyric poetry, dramas, and fictions. It has also contributed the profusely creative literary works to introduce Indian myths, Puranas, religion, nationalism, freedom struggle, economical rise and degradation, human rights, cultural diversity, ethnic conflicts, caste system, social realism, and individual consciousness in the convergence of the contemporary thinking. It has been flourished with the assistance of numerous regional literature such as Sanskrit, Urdu, Hindi, Marathi, Kannada, Malayalam, Gujarati, Assamese, Odia, Bengali, and Maithili, and later on English literature has attempted to reflect Indian culture, tradition, religion, social values, and history through the depiction of Indian life in directly writing in literature in English or translating the canonical text of various religion languages in the globally accepted English language. Thus, Indian literature has now universally been considered one of the richest and elite academic platforms in the realm of world literature. While Indian literature has mostly been utilized to depict the prestigious heritage of the upper class Hindu society in epics, legends, songs, ballads, oral poetry, and other literary genres, Dalit literature, this time, Dalit literature has originally emerged out to be the literature of the neglected and marginalized people that articulates loudly for the social identity of Dalit reality and the liberation of Dalit across the caste-ridden society in the mainstream of Indian literature. So now, how Dalit literature has emerged out to be the main form of Indian literature by the course of time. So, modern Dalit literature has brought out as a social and literary reaction to the everyday oppression of caste and caste practices in the mid 20th century independent India by experimenting with various literary forms such as poetry, short stories, autobiographies. Since then, it aesthetically strives to shape the collective voice of the socially exploited people who have been suffering from social, economical, cultural inequality and who have been fighting for Dalit values and rights and liberty. Moreover, it reformulates the caste question to reassess the significance of the Dalits in the contemporary environment of the caste identity politics, where the Hindu Brahmins are obstinately trying to keep up the force structure of the Vedic Varna system to brutally exploit and oppress the untouchable Shudras of the society. Arjun Dangle radicalized the Dalit literature to be the literary expression of marginalized and dispossessed people in poison bread traditions from Marathi Dalit literature that was published in 1994, and he and notably says Dalit literature is not simply literature. I am quoting, Dalit literature is associated with a movement to bring about nuisance. So look at the quotation, Dalit literature is associated with the movement to bring about nuisance. This is new thinking and new point of view. Sharon Kumar Limbell also defines Dalit literature in his very book, Towards an Aesthetic of Dalit Literature, History, Controversies and Considerations. He defines by Dalit literature, I mean writing about Dalits by Dalit writers with a Dalit consciousness. The form of Dalit literature is the inherent in Dalitness, and its purpose is obvious to reinform Dalit society of its slavery and narrates its pain and suffering to upper class society. And from this context, Srividya Natarajan's and S. Anand Bhimayana Experiences of Untouchability, that was published in 2011, is primarily considered to be a fictional biography talking about Ambedkar's life and real experiences of untouchability, caste discrimination and violence that are critically observed in the trajectory of the contemporary discourse of the Indian society by a Dalit woman and a Hindu Brahmin. This research paper aims to examine the deconstructive approach to logocentric mythology of casteism to poignantly interpret the hollowness and meaningless on account of the caste discrimination, violence, oppression, and resistance in the graphic novel. It subsequently attempts to reintroduce the identity politics of Dalits to make resistance to the caste stratification, inequality, dehumanization, and violence, and to enlighten the social codification of the signifying buffaloes. The Dalits in the signification of the cows, the Brahmins of the Hindu community at the crossroad of Hindutva ideology. So next, I am going to next point of my paper. That is the point about is the a conceptual study of the signifying buffalo in the caste identity politics of India. I am quoting from George Orwell's Animal Farm that was published 1945. The quote is, all animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. The above line introduced the discriminatory and exclusory nature of 1917 Russian Revolution in the allegorical categorization of animals and animalism. Similarly, we explored that our Hindu Puranas also represent the divisive and unifying nature of the Hindu society in the fictional stratification of animals from the ancient civilization of India. They mythologically prioritize the sacred rituality of the cow rather than the buffaloes, because it is believed that the cow symbolically refers to the sanctity, purity, and the good fortune of life, whereas the buffalo metaphorically signifies Mahishura, the demon, and the evil. For this reason, the Hindu Brahmins worship the cow, but they do not worship and narrate the productive values of the buffalo. Even the Hindu caste system has been familiarized in the fictional classification of animals, recognizing that all Hindus are politically equal, but some Hindus are culturally and ritually more equal than others in our Brahmanical society. According to the hierarchy of the caste system, the Hindu Brahmins are portrayed in the signification of the cow, while the Dalits are metaphorically shown in the symbolical signification of the buffalo. Although they both belong to the same Hindu community, yet the Dalits have brutally been oppressed and suppressed and exploited in the Brahmanical society because they are untouchables and a group of economically, socially, culturally low-graded people in our society. Here I am quoting from Kancha Eli Shepherd. The quote is that the Hindu religion has constructed all its symbols, animate, inanimate, around racist and casteist, unproductive cultural values. On such inanimate, value-centered symbol is the swastika. This symbol is common with minor differences to both Hitler's and Hindu Aryanism. So the Hindu casteism is an internalized hegemonic power structure that not only determines the sense of belonging, recognition, and identity of the underprivileged and marginalized people, but also offers the spiritual fascism in the swastika binary of signifying cow and the signifying buffalo. And it is constructed to depend on the rigid caste system that disrupts the cultural cliche, the unity in the diversity. So it is very important that we are Indians, we are proud of the very cliche that unity in the diversity, that cliche has been deconstructed by the caste division and caste system or casteism. So look at this another things, that it is not a new social identifying factor, that it has rather been continued from the ancient time, when the Rigved also mythologically manifest for identifying classes of our society in the chapter Purusha Shukta. As for example, Brahmin comes from the mouth of God, Kshatriya comes from the arms of God, Vaishya comes from the thigh of God, and Shudra comes from the feet of God. It is supposed that this Soturvarnik law establishes the caste system in India over the centuries, and later on the Shudras are identified to be the Dalits, the marginalized people, and the untouchable in our society. Thus, the Hindu casteism was originated from the Brahminic philosophy that stated that God created humankind unequal. It helps a social group of a nation to assert that selfhood and self-identity in the adherence of the different identical absolutes. On the other hand, it understands the identity of a social group to attain empowerment, representation, and recognition in all aspects of the society, and deprives them from all types of social opportunities in our familiar environment. The caste identity politics in India periodically encapsulate the rise and the struggle of those marginalized people who have been fighting for the religion, linguistic, gender, ethnic recognition in the society. It then makes them feel that they are metaphorically imagined to be the signifying buffalo in the signification of the cow worshipping the Brahmanical society, because the Brahmins favorably worship the cow than the buffalo, in spite of belonging likely to the same group of community. It also anthropomorphically codifies the binary structure of the signifying cow and the signifying buffalo to represent the social grade of the Brahmin and the Dalits, who are a group of socially underprivileged people in our society. To minutely observe the binary codification of the caste identity politics in our contemporary society, Kansa Ilai Shepherd, in conversation with the journalist Gurudasya Nair at the Kerala Literature Festival in Kozhikode on being a Dalit in India, has evidently said, being a Dalit is like being a buffalo in India. Most of the milk to consume comes from the buffaloes, but it is not treated at par or worshipped as a cow. It is the same predicament of Dalit, as they are the most productive. Dalits mean creativity and productivity, but they are not even allowed to enter temple. So here he strongly advocates the Dalitization of Indian society to centralize the buffalo nationalism in the signification of the cow worshipping Brahminical society. He also emphasizes on the positive values of the buffalo as a productive animal in the metaphorical association of the Dalits in the caste politics of the contemporary India. By the way, Srividya Natarajan and S. Anand's Bhimayana is a political novel that graphically shows the social status of the contemporary of the signifying buffaloes, and through the pathetic journey of Ambedkar's life and his experiences about untouchability, caste discrimination, violence, and it also redefines Ambedkarite Dalit consciousness in the contemporary signification of buffalo consciousness that grounds the downtrodden people to be aware of their privileges and social identities in the political diplomacy of the Hindu Brahmanical philosophy. So I'm going to the next point, that is a graphic account of untouchability and caste discrimination violence in Bhimayana. Bhimayana, of course, is a graphic novel that directs us to visualize the vulnerable history of the signifying buffaloes, the Dalits, and to bridge the gap between the past and the present situation of them in the crisscrosses of the caste system. It reasonably gives an account of the traumatic memories of untouchability, caste discrimination, violence, with the experiences of Dr. Ambedkar's life to enlighten us about the execution of the inequalities and injustices to the Dalits in our Indian society. The novel at the very beginning describes the contemporary quota system of the caste policy in a conversation between a Dalit woman, a caste Hindu man waiting at a bus stop in an Indian city, unfolds the binary of the caste system and its manifold troubles of our society in their argumentative conversation. Here the Hindu man belonging to the upper class society complains about the contemporary reservation policy of job by saying, I'm quoting from the text from Bhimayana, I blame these damn job quotas for backward and scheduled class. It is not fair. A Dalit woman then ironically reacts to his allegation to the unfairness of contemporary caste system, and she factually states the caste atrocity with the reference to the Kherlenzi massacre, and that the 4 members of the Bhatmange family belonging to a scheduled caste were murdered in full view of the village people in Kherlenzi of Maharashtra on 29 September in 2006. The women of the family Surekha and Priyanka were naked and raped in the eyes of the public before being murdered. This is how the novel exhibits the discriminatory and brutality of the caste system that have been happening from the ancient civilization. The first section, water, metaphorically narrates that water is a life-serving natural source for quenching our thirst, but it has historically been used to be a medium of exclusion and exploitation for the Dalits in the journey of Ambedkar's life. It signifies the caste identity in the social codification of an inherently discriminatory order of the caste system in the name of purifying and sanctifying the social pollution. It rather orthodoxically segregates people into various caste groups, enforces a social hierarchy of inequality, injustice to oppress, and suppress the downtrodden people of our society. This section of the novel exemplifies an incident of 10-year-old Ambedkar's life to portray the untouchability and caste discrimination. That incident was central to the prohibition of drinking water by the school peon when the children of the upper class society were drinking water from the tube well at school. The peon sarcastically forbade the child Bhim to touch the tube well to finger out at his belongingness in the society. All the same, the teacher criticizes the British government to allow the untouchable into schools without taking care of our traditional beliefs. Besides, Srividya Natarajan and S. Anand intertextualize Namdev Dhashal's Water in Galpita, translated from Marathi by Dilip Chitre, to delineate the caste discrimination in regards to the requirement of water. I am quoting that lines. The heart of water is generous and receives the very roots. It is healing task makes the scabs of 1,000 sorrows fail. What walls, how many walls can you build around water? How will you shackle the rushing form of water? Then Bhim shares another experience of the untouchability and the caste discrimination when they had to pay the double fare for going to Goregaon because the cart drivers were not willing to take up them on the cart. This section had finally ended with a famous story with the Hindu upper class points out all this happened more than 100 years ago. Surely such things don't happen any longer. Then Dalit woman epitomizes the brutality and the Brahmins upon the Dalits, which refers to the violence of Shatara on 14th May 2008. She immediately apprises the Madhukar Gharje, a Dalit farmer, a father of 3 children, was mercilessly murdered by the upper class villagers. The Mahat Satyagraha in 1923, most probably the unforgettable lesson of untouchability to Ambedkar at that time. It was a long-drawn struggle against the Hindu Brahmins under the leadership when the Brahmins did not allow the Dalits to drink water from the Chavada tank. In this context, Ambedkar mournfully says, if they say their religion is our religion, their rights and our must be equal. But is that case? If not, what not grounds do they say we must remain in the Hindu fold in spite of kicks and rebuffs? So the second section, shelter, metaphorically signifies the space of home in the light of casteism. But here we find Ambedkar is a displaced person, is a person of other in his own country. Now I am talking about the last section of this book, that is travel. In spite of being set in Aurangabad 1934, the third section, travel, mostly narrates the story of Ambedkar travel to Bombay in 1920. His participation to the social boycott of Hindu untouchables in Dhulia. Here Ambedkar memorizes the experiences of the caste discrimination and untouchability at the Chalisgaon station, where the Tonga drivers have refused to pick up him on their Tongas because he.
Mr. Mondal,
yes,
you have 5 more minutes.
Okay, ma'am. I'm going to next section of this paper, a deconstructive study of casteism through the Dalit lens in Bhimayana. You know, casteism is a social identifying factor that distinctly categorizes the identity of ostracized and backward communities on the basis of the social, political, religious, economic condition in the Brahmanical society. It is a process of initiating the hereditary transmission of untouchability, caste discrimination, humiliation, violence, oppression in our society. So this graphic novel is depicting that kind of untouchability through the perspective of casteism, that when the Dalit woman provides a scathing attack on Hindu casteism to expose the hypocrisies around the social codification of the caste system itself in the famous story. Here she says caste is not fair. Then novel goes back to criticize the child him to be the spokesperson of the Dalits who deconstruct the inhuman and meaningless practice of the casteism. Here he says, there my father in Goregaon is helping build water tank for the feminine stricken people who would die if it were not for his work, and here I can get water to drink at the school. So in this way, we can see that, we can understand that how Bhimayana is presenting the Dalit construction in the significance of the Buffalo consciousness in the journey of Ambedkar's life, in the contrary to historicity of Ramayana. If Ramayana addresses Brahmanation or the Brahmin consciousness in the signification of the cow at the cost of Hindutva ideology, Bhimayana is setting different kind of ideology for the people of marginalized community, for the people of downtrodden people. Here they have also portrayed the life of Ambedkar, established the hierarchy of the caste system to theorize to theorize Ambedkar ideology of Dalit political consciousness for legitimating the balanced, compassionate, unbiased society in the contemporary situation of the caste-based society. Now I'm going to the conclusion. The novel Bhimayana is the untold story of the untouchability, caste discrimination, humiliation, violence, resistance of the downtrodden people, and offers the constant struggle for survival of the signifying buffaloes in our Brahmanical society. It hereby tries to present a historiography of Ambedkar life as well as the struggle of the Dalit community, and reconstruct the past and re-examines the opacity of the Dalit history in the contemporary discourse of the caste politics for newly shaping their future history in Indian society. Further, the novel resonates the collective consciousness of the Dalit people to trigger the thinking of Dalitization in the contemporary caste identity politics from the perspective of Anticasteism. Thus, Dalitization offers a cultural specific upheaval in India, giving importance to Dalit relation is resistance in the aesthetic form of literature. I am quoting from Arundhati Roy's very speech. I do believe that India, we practice a form of apartheid that goes unnoticed by the rest of the world, and it is an important for Dalits to tell their stories, and it has been for colonized people to write their own histories. When Dalit literature has blossomed and is in full stride, then contemporary Indian literature amazing ability to ignore the true brutality and ugliness of the society in which we live will be seen for what it is, bad literature. So the graphic novel Bhimayana is certainly one of the finest literary specimen of Indian apartheid that aesthetically represents the resistance of Dalits to the historical, cultural, and religious segregation from the mainstream of Indian history, and concomitantly deconstructs the caste system of the Hindutva philosophy on account of Ambedkar experiences about untouchability and caste discrimination, exploitation, and violence. So thank you, ma'am. Thank you for the co-presenters for hearing my paper.
Thank you, Mr. Mondal. And this was a very good analysis and a very new analysis of Bhimayana. And I think we can have more discussions on it with Mr. Mondal in the question answer round. I also have several questions for you. I find it very interesting here. And so we go on to our next presenter, who is also our last presenter. This is paper 24, and this will be presented by Ms. Ankita Sahin, who is currently pursuing the master's degree in English literature from Presidency University, Kolkata. She is interested in popular culture like web series, films, and advertisements, narratology, and children's literature. She actively invests time in writing academic papers and presenting them at various national and international conferences. And the title of her paper is Narrativizing Caste, a critical exploration of the visual politics of a gardener in the Wasteland. So over to you, Ankita. And yes, I think you have shared. So is it? Yeah, so it's quite visible. Yeah. Ankita, you are not audible. I think there is some issue with your speaker, with your microphone. Oishani or Shurosri, can you help her out? Shurosri or Oishani, are you there? Can you help Ankita out with her microphone when there is some issue with the audio?
Ma'am, I think the presenter is having some issue. She has joined again.
I think Ankita is here.
Am I audible now?
Yes, yes, Ankita, you're audible.
Okay. I think the network just went away as it happens all the time.
That's all
Okay.
right. So, will you share your PPT?
Yes, ma'am. Just a sec.
Yes, it's okay.
Uh,
Okay. Your PPT is visible, and
Visible, ma'am. And I'm audible, right?
yes, yes, yes. I think
Okay. So I'll start right away without
yeah.
wasting any more time. Yeah. So the title of my paper is Narrativizing Caste, a critical exploration of the visual politics of a gardener in the Wasteland. Jyotiba Phule's Gulamgiri, published in 1873, equates casteism with slavery. His book carefully deconstructs the Vedic scriptures which make up for the largest chunk of central religious texts in Hinduism, in order to expose the latent hypocrisy and the conspiracy of the Brahmanical ideology. Gulamgiri was considered a radical manifesto of the Shodha Shodhok Samaj founded by Phule in 1973 with his friend Dhondiba and wife Savitribai Phule. As described by Marine Simi Raj, this radical association, open quotes, aimed for a society built on egalitarian foundations rather than abstract, infallible centers of power which operated with divine sanctions, close quotes. Originally written in Marathi, Gulamgiri strives to challenge the sanctity of Hindu mythologies and the infallibility of the casteist regime in Indian society as sanctioned and perpetrated by those same myths over time. Re-narrating history from an essentially anti-Hindu perspective, Phule has applied science, logic, rationality to point out the distortion of history in the hands of the upper caste Brahmins so as to justify caste oppression. In what Raj describes as an essentially historical materialist approach, Phule has laid bare the positivist underpinnings of the historiographic discourse besides drawing attention to how such a discourse has been perverted to enable construction of the dominant ideology, an ideology which in turn exclusively caters to the selfish interests of a select few, that is, the upper caste. The graphic novel A Gardener in the Wasteland, published by Navayana Publications in 2011, written by Srividya Natarajan and illustrated by Aparajita Ninnan, zooms in on the narrativized and discursive nature of casteism in India through an essentially dehistoricizing lens. The text is an adaptation of Jyotiba Phule's Gulamgiri, and it extends his critique of Hinduism to disclose caste as a process of narrative production. This paper seeks to develop how this graphic novel employs techniques of metafiction to destabilize the institutionalized historicity of caste narratives by subverting its rhetorical power. The discrepancy between the past as a given and its inevitable status as a reconstruction in the present is manifested through multiple narrative and visual techniques, out of which anachronism stands out to be one of the most pertinent. The strategic splicing of visual and verbal texts that are not temporally in sync with each other charge the narrative with an anachronistic import. For example, the visuals.
Ankita, just a second. I think
Yeah.
Shane has also stated, yes, now your slides are moving. We thought it's not moving.
No, actually, I just started referring to the.
Okay, then it's all right. Okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you for letting me know. Yeah. So, for example, the visual on page 11 shows a rotund upper caste landowner lying idle and saying, running the forms of breeze, while in the next frame, we see wayfish lower caste farmers tilling the land under a fiery sun. The word breeze is out of place in a 19th century Indian context, but Natarajan's deliberate insertion of it highlights, to quote Nair, the continuity of inequality in labor or unemployment from 1840s to the present, close quotes. The use of a vocabulary marked by contemporaneity in describing dated events further exposes the constructed nature of all histories. It shows how, like any narrative, history too is subject to linguistic malleability and metamorphosis. Natarajan, in allegiance to Phule's, is interested in laying bare the essentially positivist underpinnings of the historiographic discourse, thereby exposing its its traditional truth claims. Just as she uses the 21st century lingo to narrate experiential realities of caste inequality of 19th century India, similarly, Srividya employs contemporary visual cues to signpost the historical trauma. For example, the Aryan invasion of the Indus Valley civilization, followed by the war between them and the Aborigines, has been drawn in ironically postmodern strokes. We see the Devas and the Daityas from a prehistoric era fighting with battle tanks, machine guns, and nuclear missiles. This jarring anachronism undermines history's relationship with time by drawing our attention to the intertextuality between different historical events. The primeval struggle for survival between the Aryans and the Aborigines seamlessly intersect with familiar scenes from the world wars as they are depicted in popular culture. History's ability to transcend geotemporal continuums is being highlighted here. Besides a close investigation of the inherent complexities of the discourse on caste through a subversion of linguistic functionings, the text also draws its narrative power through cross referencing to other anti caste narratives. Through a controlled exposition of intertextuality, the novel draws attention of the readers to its own constructed nature. From alluding to global superhero figures like Batman and Superman to deconstructing Amar Chitrakatha's efforts at Hinduizing the Indian comic culture. A Gardener in the Wasteland at once pays tribute to the genre of graphic narrative as it evolved over time and it reinvents it to suit its deeply political purpose. The strategic interweaving of the generic and political concerns of the text gives birth to a new mode of perceiving the historical trauma of caste, a mode that is situated beyond the linguistically defined and ideologically deformed scope of contemplation and seeks to reclaim Dalit subjecthood from the realm of experiential so as to restore it within the realm of the visual. Given how Dalit writers have claimed a monopoly on anti caste narratives, an attempt at dissociating caste from its lived experience can enable the construction of an alternative literary space where a direct dialogue between Dalits and non Dalits is rendered possible. This is achieved in the text by the intermittent interruption of the experiential by the visual. For example, in a self reflexive style, the non Dalit author of The Gardener confesses at one point how, as a child, she has read about Lakshmi Bai, she has read about Sarojini Naidu, but never about Savitribai Phule. This gap in knowledge about a quote unquote non Brahmin radical female activist and thinker is peculiar to a non Dalit experience, and an explicit addressal to it automatically inspires a textual need to fill in that gap. For instance, in the next page, the visual narrative, almost as a response to the preceding verbal cue, presents Savitri literally breaking through the frameworks of the panel assigned to her in an attempt to step outside. It can be argued that if the inside of the panel presents the demarcated space of Dalit consciousness to where it is largely assumed that only a Dalit writer can have legitimate access, then the delimited space outside the panel becomes an universal realm of non Dalit consciousness. Therefore, a break in the panel, facilitating an easy passage between these two seemingly exclusive spaces, suggests a symbolic rupture in the anti caste literary canon through which upper caste narratorial voices like those of Ninan and Ratanajans can seep in. By visualizing these intertextual interpolations at various narrative points, Gardiner has successfully deconstructed the established historicity of the caste consciousness. Ninan's experimentation with stroke styles and line techniques while drawing the speech bubbles foregrounds the complex politics of representation in anti caste literature. The breaking down of long dialogues into subsequently smaller speech bubbles can be studied as an interesting narrative stance to convey a sense of movement in images that are otherwise static. For example, across pages 46 and 47, a series of fragmented speech balloons mirrored the motion of Noroshima in the guise of a lion attacking and mutilating Hiranyakashipu in his sleep. Schema defines these fractured speech balloons as quote unquote pictorial signifiers, where the printed word as shown is altered to make it function like an audio, broken up into fragments not only by the speech balloons, but through a serialized patterning of images which defies the static sense of a framed picture. Besides charging the visual with a potent dynamism, such as strategic fracturing of dialogues also parallels the breaking down of the barriers of caste. In page 12, the screech and the vroom of the traffic is equated with the insults of the upper caste men in the lower panels to show how Savitri ignores them, just like Ninan ignores the traffic noise by simply rolling up the window. To Savitri, these are just redundant noises meant to be simply ignored, and it also indicates the routine nature of insults. Traffic noise is something anyone who goes out every day in a city gets used to after a certain point of time, so much so that it becomes an intrinsic part of the metropolis landscape. Similarly, the noise of these insults hurled at Savitri are also intrinsic to the lived experience of a caste individual, to which nobody pays attention to anymore. Similarly, so much that they have grown banal for Savitri. Such an experimentation with speech type and style tries to construct and map the psychological cartography of the Dalit consciousness, where insult and abuse seem to have become normalized. We also notice how the speech bubbles of the Brahmins are always twirled and twisted, whereas those of Savitri, Jyotiba, and Dondiba are drawn in straight strokes. At the diegetic level, this is to help readers distinguish between the speeches of different characters. But at the extra diegetic level, it exposes the convoluted nature of the Brahminical ideology as opposed to the straightforward, honest intentions of Phule and his allies. Besides evidencing the ruptures inherent within a Brahminized discourse that seeks to justify caste hierarchy, the distinct speech patterns also deconstruct the Brahminical ideology by revealing how such an ideology has served to perpetuate systematic distortion of history over time. This is aptly depicted in a visual where instead of a speech bubble, we see a typewriter placed right within the Brahmin's gaping mouth, and outcomes of it a roll of paper with pronouncements typed on it. By critiquing the Brahmin's textual control over the historiographic discourse, Srividya and Aparajita expose history as a site of narrative production. Since the Manusmriti claims that Brahmins were born from the mouth of Brahma, heralded as the supreme god of Hinduism, Ninan in response has depicted the Brahmin's mouth as wombs out of which casteism itself is conceived. This visual tying in of the Brahmin's narratorial authority over history with his corporeal existence marks a defining moment of departure from the conventional approach in theorizing caste. Since it is generally the Dalit's body that serves as a focal point of anti-caste studies, Gardiner in the Wasteland stands out because it offers an alternative perspective by historicizing the body of the perpetrator, that is, the Brahmin, and commenting on how its easy susceptibility to power and corruption can help us rethink casteism. As Nayek points out, the visual politics involved in the representation of the Brahmins and the Dalits in the graphic novel is at once invasive and subversive. In order to achieve this, Ninan has extensively exploited the fat Brahmin versus underfed Dalit body stereotype in her artwork, to an extent of being argued by many critics as borderline grotesque. The depiction of the Brahmins as literally ugly has much to do with the popular investigation of the Dalit's body as a site of pollution. Interestingly, in the Gardener, it is the Brahmin who seems to be morally, corporeally, and ideologically prone to corruption and contamination. For example, in one of the introductory sequences of the text, the Brahmins come across as two-faced, vile, uncouth skimmers who pick their noses and scratch themselves while asking for Ganga Jal, which is the holy water. Since at the heart of caste-based oppression is the idea that lower caste people are innately predisposed to unholiness, the strange reversal of the cleanliness quotient strikes one as both sarcastic and ironical. The twisted physiognomies of the Brahmins and their corporeal exaggerations hint at how the caste system...
Sen, you have 5 more minutes.
Okay, ma'am. I'll wrap up. Exaggerations hint at how the caste system has dehumanized both the Brahmin as well as the Dalit. The construction of the narrative thrives on its self-reflexive potency and keeps peeling up in layers to expose further sub-narratives ensconced within each other. The Gardener in the Wasteland can be read as a classic example of embedded narrative style. For example, there is the narrative level of Natarajan and Menon talking about caste, about Phule, and about their writing about Phule. Within this is Phule's story, narrated very often with the storyteller located within a visual frame. This is the second narrative level. Finally, within the Phule story, we have Phule delivering his revisionary myths to his friend Dhondiba. The style of meta-narration subscribes to and aligns with what Keith Jenkins describes as the burden of history that a historian must bear while narrativizing the past. The inevitable interpolations between the identities of an individual as a historian and a storyteller charges history with a political import that tends to undercut its traditional truth claims. A parallel can be drawn between Jenkins' argument and Ninan's visual depiction of mythologized history. In page 56, as something that literally weighs down on the one trying to retell it, almost crushing the historian beneath its symbolic burden. Besides an anachronistic visualization of a Nike-clad Vamana's foot squishing the Kshatriya hero king Bali, this panel also draws attention to how the established historicity of the caste hierarchy in India is encoded in the bodies of the lower castes, and any attempt on their part at deconstructing it must entail a threat of annihilating such bodies. With Dhondiba and Phule struggling to survive the weight of the narrative frame within which history has been forced to fit, the reader comes to acknowledge the emotional and personal cost at which the historian/storyteller must decide what to tell about the past and what not. The art of dealing in history is not without hazards, as we realize. By envisioning a bodily relationship between history and the historian, where each can potentially distort the other, we realize that just as history can be subject to manipulation and mediation by the historian, similarly, the historian is also vulnerable to history's claim on his or her very sense of being. Drawing on Jenkins' investigation of the intrinsic relationship between history and power, one understands how the historian is never immune to the agency that comes with owning narratorial authority over the past. As Jenkins elucidates, she is always choosing and choosing at an opportunity cost. Finally, ma'am, how many minutes do I have?
You have 2 to 3 minutes more.
Okay, then I'll just conclude. This is like the last slide where quoting Pramod K. Nair, I would like to point out that how the extensively exploration of the interrelatedness between the embedded narrative structure of the text and its political intent is also exposed in this cover page, where where the a facsimile representation of Phule's Gulamgiri is printed. To quote Nair, what this achieves is at once a distancing into the past but also a palimpsest. We are made to aware that Gardener in a Wasteland is a reworking, a writing over a writing into and of the older text, which yet again alerts us, I close quote, that makes us realize how Gardener in the Wasteland makes no claim whatsoever about historical accuracy. By foregrounding its reliance on an earlier text, it makes a larger theoretical narrative claim, which is all history is mediated, and their book is no different. Thank you.
Thank you, Ankita. That was a really good presentation and a very good and minute analysis of our gardener in the Westland. And we are at the end of.
Sorry, ma'am, of the initial glitches. I regret the inconvenience that was caused in the beginning. Sorry, and thank you again, everyone, for everything. Thank you.
It's okay, Ankita. I think we will make up for the time lost, or we are actually on time, and we have quite a good amount of time for further discussion, where any presenter, if you have any more points to discuss, you can bring them up. But first, let me tell you, this was a really good interpretation of texts, of picture books, of graphic novels, of visualization, and these graphic narratives, and how it contributes to Dalit literature, how it facilitates Dalit literature. So I think we will take up questions, and the questions has already started coming in. And first I will also start by asking, I think, our first our first presenter, Ms. Dandapat, about because her paper was also very engaging. It talked about not just visualization, not just picture books, but also about children's literature. So I want to ask Ms. Dandapat about this. How do you look at it? How do you see these picture books in the larger over of Indian English children's literature? Because why I'm asking this, let me tell you that Indian English children's literature draws heavily from Indian traditional folklore and Sanskrit texts and epics like Panchatantra, Jatok, Puranas, Ramayana, Mahabharata. So there is this whole essence of that traditional folklore in language, in visuality, in multimodality, everything that you have also talked about in your paper. So I want to know, how do you place these picture books in this whole context of Indian English children's literature? Where do you see Dalit English children's literature there?
Thank you, ma'am, for the question. That is a really very relevant question in this context. As you have already suggested, that when I talk about children's literature, it is already a very vast area. As you have mentioned already, that it takes up from the mythologies that we already have. But I'm talking about the contemporary genre. In this contemporary genre, with the new house publications from Tulika Books, Katha Publications, Pratham Books, what these new publication houses are doing is that they are not only relying on the mythologies that we already had, but they are trying to weave a new narrative. They are trying to show how the contemporary reality is reflected in the current picture books. And a reason of taking picture books is that there are not many researches that has been followed in Indian picture books, even though there are a few works has been done in graphic novels and other visual narratives, but picture books are a very this is a very new genre to take up. I think I have addressed your question.
Yes, Sridipa, we understand, and I think yes, it answers my question quite a lot. But I would also want to see a more exploration of Dalit literature, and in case of with respect to children's literature, because we do not see that much. We see Dalit literature, we see Dalit graphic novels now, we see so much Dalit consciousness in the literary sphere. But you're right in pointing out that there is little scholarship as well as little work in Dalit children's literature. We do not even have that terminology, that it is not Indian English children's literature, but Dalit Indian English children's literature in that way, which will have this, as you have rightly pointed out, in I Will Save My Land and in other picture books, which intersects caste, class, as well as gender. So I think it is a very productive ground for scholarship as well as creativity. And in that, in scholarship, I would like to see more how you place this in this context of children's literature.
Yes, ma'am. I could not clarify it due to the short span of time during my presentation, but I would like to mention one book that I have read recently by Michelle Superley, and it talks about how Indian children's literature she takes up from 1880s to 2010, and she takes up around 100 Indian children's literature, mostly novels, and she finds out how Indian children's Indian children's novels has focused only on the middle class Hindu protagonists. And whenever the Dalit child are represented, they are mostly represented in a peripheral way. Mostly, it has been shown how, in one of the adventure novel that I don't remember the novel's name exactly, but in that novel, we see how the middle class Hindu protagonist, she saves the Dalit girl. And most of the times, it has been shown that the Dalit protagonist, even if there is a Dalit child present in that novel, they are mostly in the need of help, and they need help from the upper class or middle class protagonists. But in these new picture book, in these picture books, I have found how this protagonists are their position has been shifted from periphery to center. And since you were talking about the relevance of this in the picture books I have chosen. Okay. Give me a moment. Okay, so I'll give a few references from the text that I have chosen. For example, when I talk about Vimayana, the boy who asked why, in this text, Bhim recounts of a train journey where he and his siblings were set on a journey, and they found a station master who was passing smiling glance to see them, and to find them as a bunch of nice children, well dressed and polite. But when he mentions his identity of being Mahar, that is a low caste, then in no time, the smiling glance of that station master, it turns into a like expression of disgust. And in the like later events, when the journey extends, the bullock cart driver, they refuses to drive them because of their caste identity. And when I come to I will say my land, Mati and her Ajji, that is her grandmother's Dalit consciousness of saving her land is not only focused of how they are supposed to inherit land. Like if we take up Indian feminism, then we in the initial stages we have seen how women had to fight against the brahminical patriarchy. But when it comes to lower class women did not have to fight against the opportunity to work. They used to work, they used to get their money, they used to go to agricultural land to produce fruitful labor, but their work has not been recognized. Now in this story, I will save my land, Mati, she in an instance, her father taunts her that girls don't inherit land, and in response to that, she and her Ajji fights back. But it is not only about the inheritance from their ancestors, but it is also about their Adivasi or their Dalit identity. Being lower caste, there is a comment from upper caste to Ajji that lower caste women, they don't inherit land. So this triply oppressed position of being a woman, of being a Dalit, and at the same time from being a lower class woman, the struggle is intersectioned into three several part, and it is multi-layered.
Yes, yes, Sridipa, I think you are right, and you have actually opened up a very good discussion on this lack of space for Dalit women and Dalit children. So that is an addition that we have been discussing about, not just women and the class issue or the caste issue, but also the children. Where do they find representation? So I think that is a very good area to research, actually. Thank you, Sridipa. I will then move on to Swapnil Shaha's question for Ankita. For Ankita Sen. So he says, is it not that the stigmatized identity of the Dalit bodies are somehow gets re-stigmatized in the narrative mode of graphic novel by how it portrays the bodies in the form of caricature, somehow hyper-ritualizing the common images portraying the dichotomy of Dalit versus Brahmins? So yes, over to you.
Yes, thank you for the question, firstly. And then, yes, I do believe that there is a deliberate attempt at uh, further reinforcing the stereotype that had been reinforced, in a reverse way, because it was always the other way. As right at the beginning, Ninan and Natarajan, as they were discussing Amar Chitra Katha, they talked about how it was always the same way in which women were portrayed as super curvy and sexualized, whereas the demons, who were mostly from the lower caste, were of dark colors and ugly. I think one of my preceding presenters had already talked about the color coding in representing caste in graphic novels and comics. And I think Ninan deliberately further reinforces the stereotype because she wants to draw attention to the legacy of this stereotyping that had continued for so long, in a way that she cannot move away from that stereotyping. Since there are so many meta narrative, I read it also as a meta narrative stance, where uh, in a way she is trying to tell maybe that the very form from where my text has developed, from where my book has come out, that is the genre of the graphic novel, it is so deeply embedded, thanks to Amar Chitra Katha, in the stereotyping, that it is impossible to break away from that. And I think that this is deliberate because it had been repeated time and again. They must not be that foolish to sort of keep on doing this without being, in a meta narrative way, aware of what they are doing, because they are aware of so many other things in the novel. They are paying attention to such minute details. This must not have eluded their attention as well. I think it's a very deliberate attempt where to show that there can be only one kind of Brahmin, the fat, ugly, with hairy bodies, twisted physiognomies. And yes, so I think instead of reading it as a fault on their part, I guess it is a meta comment on the novel, on the genre itself. I don't know if I have answered it correctly, but this is what I felt, because I also
Swapnil,
about this.
if you have got your answer, but I think I have got the answer of this. It's more symbolic. It's more symbolic than a representation of the entire past, I think, or entire community. Yes. I think the question and the answer both were very, very thought-provoking. And and next I will go to Kalaiarasi, who also presented on a garden in the Wasteland. And I want to know from her that she was talking about this Dalit aesthetics being very prominent and predominant in bringing about this re-emergence of the Dalit consciousness, of the Dalit identity. So I want to know that when we talk about Dalit aesthetics, when we talk about the visualization of the Dalits, so we also are using graphic novels to, as one of the genres. So why are we using that? What do you think? That because graphic novel, you see, is a nascent genre. It's still growing. There is a dedicated yet niche readership. So there is not a lot of people reading it, and also definitely not people from remote areas, from actually marginalized areas, Dalits who are probably still living in Keralanji or in outskirts, so Chapawat or Badaun or Bhatani Tola, so spaces where Dalit atrocities actually happen. There people are not reading these graphic novels. People mostly in the metropolis are reading it. And also this is a very postmodernist way of storytelling. So what do you think about it? How is this, how is it positing the Dalit aesthetics in the mainstream and also reaching out to beyond the metropolis?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here. So you yourself has rightly pointed out that the graphic narrative, graphic genre is very nascent. It is growing, and it is not that everybody reads the form. Actually, very few people, the elite people, the form itself, it's meant for elite actually. So here the target is for elites actually, who are not bothered about Dalit world actually. We were producing literature, we were writing novels, but we don't know whether it is. It reaches the target audience. Like even if we say that if we have Dalit literature as our syllabus in our university and colleges as well, we never know like how people are taking it. So like even though we are teaching it in the class, I'm not sure whether the aim of the literature is being taught to students in the right way. So like we see people, most of the researchers that comes related to Dalit literature or Dalit studies are someone who has understood the ideology better or someone who comes from the same background. So here the target audience is elite, and this may be a local issue, but the writers through this form, they want to take it to the global audience. They want to make sure that the people around the world knows what is happening here. Of course, we are producing literature, but this form is so special. Initially it was meant for children, but we are sure if this kind of representation comes, like it may reach children in the right way, in the positive way. I believe like that.
Okay. Thank you, Kalaiarasi. I think yes, that explores the point where how graphic novel is reaching a particular kind of readership, but maybe it has still some way to go in terms of accessibility to people, because because I will refer to Limbale here. Limbale, how he defines Dalit identity or Dalit consciousness or Dalit literature is also by it's not to just inform the upper caste regarding the pain and suffering of the Dalits, but also inform Dalit society of its slavery and narrates its own pain. So in a way, I think that part of accessibility is still there to cover. And I would go to Ankita once. Do you have anything to add to Kalaiarasi? Because you have also dealt with the same text, and you have also talked about how it informs and it creates a counter culture. So do you think it is reaching people beyond the metropolis?
I think to some extent, yes, but there is always this politics of publication and monetary capital, capitalization involved in this, and it depends on what kind of places do we find these books being displayed and sold. Because to be frank, to be honest, like railway station or local bookstores in in small town Indian societies, I don't think they really like to invest in Navyana publications or something like that, even though Navyana itself is a very cliche and sorry, not cliche, niche, I mean NICH, niche publication house, which solely focus on these marginalized narratives. And but although they focus on their marginalized narratives, yet in a way they are yet to sort of find their way into places which are really marginalized, because most of the time it is star marks or other global capitalized book chains where we find Navyana publications being displayed. So I guess, but Amar Chitra Katha on that hand is much more popular, is much more available in railway stations. We have issues of Amar Chitra Katha being sold right on the footpath. And I think this goes into the making on determining the market for these books. Yeah.
I think both of you, Ankita and Kalaiarasi, have given us a further knowledge about the readership and how this affects the Dalit consciousness and identity, from not just from local to global, but from also global to local. So from the metropolis to the knowledge and the education should also spread out beyond metropolis. So from global or the capital or the metropolis to the local. I think yes, Sridipa would want to add to this discussion. Yes, Sridipa, please add to this. Then I'll go to Mr. Mondal. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am, for bringing up this discussion. As I would like to mention that one of the picture books by Tulika Publishers by Mahashweta Devi, The YY Girl, this represents the Adivasi girl child, and it has been included in CBSE board school. And when this sort of initiatives are taken, when after 2009's Right to Education Act, several Dalit and Adivasi children, they are included into various schools that are like CBSE board or ICSE board. So when these picture books or these graphic novels on Dalit or Adivasi are included there in their syllabus, this gives them a scope to see their own reality, as well as the other non-Dalit or non-Adivasi children, they get a scope to know the other reality that is far different from their day-to-day life.
Yes, I think Sridipa, you have made a very right point, right addition to this, that education becomes this, the sector of education or academia, they become one of the institutions where these books can be introduced. So this will have more accessibility. This will have, people will know about these books more, and it is definitely a very interesting read. Whether it is picture books or graphic novels, it's interesting. It gives multiple layers of meanings through visual as well as verbal, as all of you have pointed out in your specific textbooks, the primary sources. So I think, yes, so that knowledge regarding the book especially, and secondly accessibility to the book, this too have to be facilitated on a very larger basis. And Sridipa has rightly pointed out, education is one of those sectors where we can introduce this. And added to that, we have also introduced, say, Bhimayana as a curriculum, as a part of the curriculum in several universities. So that also brings in the discussion even more. And so I'll just have my last question to Mr. Mondal. And Mr. Mondal actually applied a very new theory, Buffalo nationalism, to not a new theory, but theory which has been newly applied to Bhimayana. So it is a new perspective, it is a new lens to read Bhimayana. And so my question, yes, we just need 5 more minutes, yes. So my question to Mr. Mondal is also that there is one section in Bhimayana, especially in the first chapter, where we actually see the depiction of a buffalo, which is huge brown buffalo, where it is said that people will touch the hair of a buffalo, will cut the hair of a buffalo, but not the hair of a mahar child. And the same reference comes up when accessibility to drinking water, that episode comes up. So in a way, Bhimayana also shows a social hierarchy where buffaloes and goats are superior, or in this hierarchy, than even mahars. So how do you read that point, that where buffalo is actually an animal, not a metaphor, and it is being given more prominence than a mahar? What is your take on that?
Actually, if you go through this text Bhimayana, you will understand that this picture, that means a graphic picture of buffalo, has been represented over here. Something that kind of animal is represented, it is accepted in the society, but not the mahar. So this thing has been somehow, I am trying to reformulating that kind of things as well. Mahar is that kind of community which cannot be accepted in our Brahmanical society, but the buffalo can be. So buffalo is representing that kind of things, holy, or something in the codification of the binary codification of the cow. Here I am representing, and here in this text there is a of course this question is controversial actually, because the scenario, graphic scenario which is attached to this conception, totally representing how they're conceptually made up. We are just saying that this could be just kind of things. It is euphemism. It is kind of euphemistically we can use that buffalo can be accepted, not the mahar. So that is representing that buffalo is kind of underestimated in comparison to the cow imagery. But more than that, Dalit is not acceptable. So to represent the humiliation and underestimation of the downtrodden community, of the Dalit community, here somehow the image of buffalo is communicated, is represented, is reinterpolated over this section, water section. I mean, somehow.
Thank you, Mr. Mondal. I think that is beautifully explained. And in short, that would be that in certain context, buffalo nationalism actually talks about buffaloes in a metaphorical way, and in that way, mahars probably is being treated more buffalo than the real animal itself, the real buffalo itself. It's given more prominence in the society at times. Yes. I think,
ma'am, one thing to say that if you want to explore these things in very idealistic way, in the very hermeneutic way, if you can say, so that kind of idea, if you trigger your mind that buffalo, some S. Anand and Natarajan, they made these things, they reproduced these things, they reformulated these things, that if you think Mahar is that kind of community, and if you think that, if you talk about the buffalo, that means buffalo somehow is a kind of animal that is not accepted in our Brahmanical society. But more than that, Mahar also cannot be acceptable in this society. So to represent the underestimation and the humiliation and the caste discriminations of the Mahar community, of the untouchable community, of the Dalit community, he technically manipulates that kind of the authors over here. They manipulated these technical words. Look, it is although cow is more acceptable in our society, but look, animals cannot be buffalo-like animals cannot be acceptable in society. But more than that, the Mahar community will not be acceptable or cannot be acceptable in our society anyhow, at any cost, at the same time. So to underestimate, to emphasize, the Mahar community is more untouchable than the animals, and that animals the authors are representing buffalo animals symbolically or metaphorically somehow are that kind of animals coming from that kind of underestimated category of animals. So in the Brahmanical aspects, in the eyes of Brahmins, but in the Brahmins of eyes, Mahars are more unacceptable in our society. So it is diplomacy. It is the political diplomacy of Hindutva philosophy. I think I overlooked this text in this way.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mondal. That was actually a very good explanation of that part of the book. And unfortunately, we do not have any more time for any more discussion. But I think that was a very interactive and engaging session. And I thank my presenters and the audience for such a wonderful session. Thank you so much. So I think we are going for a break now. So this is the end of the session. Thank you so much, everyone.
Once again, I am thanking you for inspiring us all over. So it's okay, ma'am.
Thank you.